This is the 1973 Vintage Sports Car Club film. Photography is by Stuart Bennett, Nigel Hutchinson and Brian Pratt. Sound by Peter Hopwood and commentary by David Roscoe. This is the film they said could never be made. Unfortunately, they were wrong. In this film, you will thrill to the lightning pitwork of the ace racing teams. See Dudley Gagan perform the dance of the Seven Veils. See the phantom bollard crusher strike again. And share in the unique thrills of marshalling. Join in strange Celtic rites in Wales. But first, to the more serious business of driving tests. This is the Bewley Concours and Driving Test Meeting in the spring. Plenty of elegant machinery for the judges and a chance to blow out the cobwebs from the more competitive motors. And you can tell it's spring because Freddie Giles has a bit of a love-in. And an Alfa looks beautiful inside and outside. Cooper plots his course in a high wind, but unfortunately, he seems to have turned over 2 pages at once as he sets off and goes round everything twice. But you don't get double marks for doing everything twice. The driving tests this year took place on the newly laid surface alongside the Motor Museum, and competitors could try their skill on the now familiar mixture of garages and pylon dodging. Austin 7s come in all shapes and sizes, from the flying bathtub to the original Herbert Austin model. And this is Pat Marsh, setting off in a very early, very original Austin 7. All credit to him with the hood up, it's like driving in blinkers. And also, if you're as tall as him, well then you conduct the whole test in a sort of cringing position. Here comes Barry Clark. The steering is a little dicey forwards, and the steering backwards is double dicey. This is the Ford GN, a device which doesn't actually appear in the records of Mr. Ford or Mr. GN. We've cut a few bits of this film because if you could lip read, then you might learn some new words. And there was one of them. But you see, we just cut it out so that you only see him winding it up. And on today's form, I don't think he's going to be amongst the prize winners. now, over to another crowd, over to another event. This is Lichfield for the Curborough speed trials. And there's enough rain here to make Jack Cousteau feel at home. There was an excellent turnout of the fast machinery for this short, tricky sprint. But it wasn't the best day for the cars with bags of horsepower. It was sometimes a little difficult to decide whether to keep yourself or your motor car dry, but by the end of practice, everything was about as wet as it could get, so it didn't matter. But vintage members are known for their cheerfulness in adversity, and Frank Wall's no exception. Dripping numbers were the order of the day, but they were still readable, and there's a steering system that's positively telegraphic. Freddie Giles, rain or no rain, he sets out for the start line. And it's difficult to get grip in this slippery weather. And on the line, rain doesn't stop the cars, it's just that you can't see to drive them. And somebody's told him, for heaven's sake, don't drop that flag. The circuit at Kerbero is straight off the start, then a sweeping left-hander, followed by rather tight S's, and then down the main straight, which causes a patter of little Dunlops. And here's John Rowley in the Schneider. A very neat run through the S's, and then on to the sweeping right-hander, which leads in turn to the main straight. Here comes Lionel Stretton in the Fraser Nash. He's certainly being very tiptoe through the S's. And he's quite right too, because this was no place for the faint-hearted. And Nigel Arnold-Foster was by no means being faint-hearted. By halfway through the afternoon, the track had become so greasy at the S's that even the most skillful were trying to remember the difference between understeer and oversteer. Ken Neve in the TT Humber, a very well judged and quick run. But for some, it was a question of getting it really crossed up. That's the Alvis of Humphrey Collis, trying to see if he's as wide as the track. And even the Fraser Nash Brigade were finding things a little twitchy. That's Guy Smith. And here's Ian Traynor. Only just holding their own on the way out from the S's. For some, it paid to pretend that the course wasn't there at all and just take your own route through the S's. And here's David Kurgan on his way to fastest time of the day. Frank Wall looks neat into the S's, but they eventually caught him out too. He was quite all right, all he wanted was a push. But the breakdown van set off at such a bat that he had to wave it away to save himself from being forcibly rescued. There were some who had their problems before they even got to the S's. And first prize for drama went to David White, who did the complete thing. The marshals run to the rescue, but it's the car which gets all the attention, not poor David. They have to push him out the way to get at the motor car. And here's a nice advertisement for triplex coming up. And so, an unhappy 750 man returns the pieces to the paddock to end the Kerbero sprint. And a frozen marshal is told to go home and thaw out. And when the times were added up, it was indeed David Kurgan who took fastest time of the day, with the fastest vintage time to Morton in the Bentley. This was certainly a day to remember, but mainly because of the weather. And now, it's time to slice our way over to Cheddar, if you'll pardon the expression, for the light car rally. This event also includes a class for Edwardians, hence the presence of John Rowley in the Schneider and Ron Barker with the Napier. And that's the Crosley of Mellish, with twin rears. The car, that is, not Mr. Mellish. Again this year, the organisation is in the capable hands of Sue and Piers Blakeney Edwards. Now this is a not too serious event, just a gentle Sunday tour. That is, until you get lost, then the catching up can get like a Grand Prix. There goes Rowley in the Schneider and Steady Barker in the Napier. And that very beautiful Crosley comes to the start. Number 13. And College hopes that his luck isn't as bad as his number. Hamilton Gould in the very pretty 11 horsepower Citroën. And although the start took place in bright sunlight, the course led competitors right through the monsoon area, and any bit of shelter was welcome. Honours went to the Napier, Riddle's GN, and Hamilton Gould's Citroën. But now, let's point the lens at Silverstone, where the racing boys are in full flight at the July meeting. That's Clifford parking himself where he can get a good view of the race. This meeting was like sandpaper, wet and dry, and Remus gets a change of footwear for the Hawthorne Trophy race. There was a great turnout for this race. Corners Aston was in contention with Roberts in the Lotus and Lindsay and Remus. And off the line, it was the Aston just in the lead. Beckett's lap 1, and it's Aston ERA Lotus. Glass in the ERA, trying hard, takes to the wrong side of the bollards. And Roberts is really pushing the Lotus, now in second spot. But the Aston still holds its lead. And there's a fine pair of Bristols. Then Bill Morris goes wide at Woodcote, but nothing interfered with Corner's progress in the lead. And Dudley Gagan seems to have got plenty of space around him too. And then Bailey did it in the biggest possible way at Woodcote, and Simpson was left on his own. And Corner came through to win the Hawthorne Trophy for the third year. And poor Bailey's Cooper was in need of a heavy hammer. The Riley parade brought out all shapes and sizes. And part of the enjoyment at any vintage race meeting is the paddock tour, where the machinery is more varied and the familiar faces abound. And everybody seems to be busy doing their own thing. And we hesitate to say what he's doing. But now it's back to the racing and to the Boulogne Trophy, where the Bentley Napier was favourite to see off the Bugattis. After all, 24 litres ought to see off 2 and a bit litres. There's Russ Turner in his Bentley. And off the line, the Bugattis were no match for Llewellyn. And down to Copse for the first of 10 laps, the Bentley was clear. This really was quite a traffic jam. But Llewellyn was pulling out from the ruck. Into Woodcote for the first time, and the Bentley Napier was further ahead. But as Llewellyn came down into Copse, the surprise was the battle for second place. Foote and Moffat. The Cognac Special just made it. And the order was then Llewellyn, the Cognac Special, and Moffat in the Bugatti. But then the rain started in earnest, and we all knew that this would not help Llewellyn. And it didn't help Fancheri in the Bentley much either. Moffat was in a safe third place. But Llewellyn in the Bentley Napier was having to soft pedal in these conditions. A very bold drive by Llewellyn, but there was nothing he could do to keep first place. And Footed took the lead in the Cognac Special. And then, on the next to last lap, the Bentley hit the bank at Maggots and provided Llewellyn with a winter rebuilding programme that was going to keep him busy. All this excitement nearly proved too much for Bill Boddy. And Dudley Gagan rounded the day off with a little dance in the paddock. And now, finally, we go west to Wales. And yes, you've guessed right. It's the Welsh Rally. There are two important traditions at this event. First, we all gather at the Radnorshire Arms. And second, Freddie Giles undertakes his annual rebuild. Another departure was the new secret number plate, hinged so that you can't give anything away. And this year we saw another departure. It was a fitting of wooden wheels to Forenzas. As regulars will remember, this event combines gentle touring through the countryside, but is interspersed with fiendish assaults on the north face of the Eiger. A new feature this year was to allow entries straight from the boat show. But really, things are supposed to be very serious and properly conducted. The Welsh is no laughing matter. And here comes the original trampoline special. And who needs shock absorbers anyway? This looks good. First you introduce a car going up the hill, and then you route one down the hill. Chicken. Everything's vintage here. There's a drop of the vintage white going in the radiator, a drop of the vintage red going in the bloke. And Max has got the right name for this sort of place. And watch this. Here's the Vauxhall Choral Society in full song. Another Vauxhall. This time, John Rowley and Company. And they take their Vauxhall up clean. Now then, all together. Well, really ought to keep in time with the music, but he got there anyway. And on to the next hill, where the organisers were beginning to realise that the whole thing was getting a bit too difficult. And Julian Beresford, who was in charge of the whole affair, was beginning to literally will the motor cars up the hill. And here's a new thing this year. there was an underground section where cars completely disappeared, and for all we know, several of them may still be down there. It's extremely awkward for our ace reporter who's trying to get a proper view of the thing. And here comes President Nigel Arnold Forster in a very dramatic run up the hill, which succeeds. He's closely followed by Freddie Giles with everything now bolted together. He's taking a gentler approach to it, but he too is successful. This is Tony Jones in full sail in his Vauxhall. And it answers well to the helm on the first corner, but then he has to drop anchor. But by the end of the day, the cast was all on stage for Smatcher. And Hillmeister Beresford was hoping that someone was going to climb at least one of the hills clean. But a wide turning circle don't go round a hairpin, even in Wales. But then a fiendishly clever presidential plot is put into action and Nigel slides back for a better send-off. And Gruppenführer Beresford mentally runs through the regs. But the president's away. And that makes at least one marshal happy. Then, before Julian can find out where it says you can't, Pamela Arnold Forster does it and disappears to the top of Smatcher. But then, to the obvious relief of Herr von Beresford, it's the end of another Welsh Rally. And all he has to do now is to put the hills back where he found them and return the course to the sheep. And perhaps his feelings now are the same as the kindly greeting we saw in a Welsh village welcoming the VSCC to their country once again.